Hey guys, welcome back to the Prehistoric Life Podcast. And today we're back with another interview, this time with another paleontologist, Dr. Scott Persons. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, hello. Yeah, I'm Dr. Scott Persons. I'm a curator of the Mace Brown Museum of Natural History and a professor of paleontology here at the College of Charleston.
So, the most basic question that I start every interview off with is what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, so I get asked that a lot. My standard answer is that my favorite dinosaur is whichever one I'm working on at the moment. I wasn't expecting that question, but I've got hold on a second. I've got pull it out here from the pelican case. This is a part of the specimen that I'm working on. So this is from one of our field sites in Wyoming. So we dig every summer in Glen Rock, Wyoming. So Lance Formation, that's the equivalent of Hell Creek. And here it is. So this is a chunk of a hip, the ischium from a nodosaur. So right now, a nodosaur is my favorite dinosaur. Although technically, this fossil is a 2-for-1 deal, because if you look right there, you can see there's a great big hole in it. And that hole is not supposed to be there. Near as we can figure, that hole is a bite mark, probably left by a tyrannosaur. If you look closely, you can see in addition to the big indentation, there's also this sort of cut mark, this slash running right through the bone, indicating that it was made by a tooth with a serrated edge. If I turn it sideways too, you can see there's a series of holes running right along that edge there too. So that's another bite spot. Now we've got more to this nodosaur than just the hip. As a matter of fact, mostly what we've got are pieces of armor. I'm associated with that little nodosaur model here. And we've got some of the what are often referred to as sort of half rings or cervical rings, the big plates of bone that are located right there behind the head. They've got very, very strong keels to them. Now, I'm referring to the specimen as just a nodosaur as opposed to Edmontoni or Denversaurus, which are the most likely candidates for it, because we're not entirely sure exactly what kind of
Which one it is?
nodosaur our animal is. It's got some evidence of fusion of some of the osteoderms further back, which is not a trait that we're accustomed to seeing in animals like Denversaurus or Edmontoni.
So, could that be maybe a new species or just aging to the specimen?
That's a great question. It would be very exciting if it was a new species or whatnot, or if it represented some different ontogenetic change in nodosaurs. For right now, we're not ready to comment on that.
New.
We're actively doing the research, so we're actively measuring and describing and doing our best to analyze the specimen. So it really is the animal, the fossil that is right there at the top of my docket, at the head of my to-do list. And it's a wonderful, fascinating specimen. We went back last summer and found more of the armor of the animal. So it's the dinosaur I'm working on right
Of the same animal or like just the same species?
the same specimen from the
Oh,
same quarry. So this was a case, as often happens, it's a specimen that was dug up historically many years ago, and the quarrying work that was done on it stopped prematurely, stopped before everyone had dug down as far as they needed to go in order to find the rest of it. This was a site where we knew the specimen had been dug up at this quarry locality. And gosh darn it all, every summer that we would walk past this site, we would usually find one or two little osteoderms. Osteoderms, again, are pieces of armor
just
from the
little.
back, little osteoderms on the surface. And that was an indicator that we're eroding out of the site. It meant that there was probably more of the specimen there that hadn't been pulled out. So we decided to just take a chance to break new ground and to go back into the hillside further. And sure enough, more pieces of armor, more chunks of this animal came out.
That always exciting, of course. dinosaurs just always excite me in general. I mean, so you talked about how there were those holes in it,
Mhm.
and can you kind of tell what kind of dinosaur was biting onto it based on
Yeah, so it's got
the
to be a
similarity?
tyrannosaur at this point in time. Our best candidates are, our only carnivorous candidates really are tyrannosaur or some sort of deinonychosaur, be it a troodontid or a dromaeosaur. Could also, of course, be some sort of crocodiliform. And the fact that we have got that cut left by a serrated edge rules out the crocodiliforms that we've got from the environment. On the bite marks there on the side, you can also probably make it out that they're not perfectly round in this case. They're a little bit elliptical. That's consistent with the form of Tyrannosaur teeth. And of course, there's no Deinonychosaur in the environment that's big enough to leave a bite mark like this. So we
'Cause
definitely seem to be dealing with a Tyrannosaurus.
I always hate calling dinosaurs smaller because most of them they're smaller dinosaurs, but some of the Deinonychus and other things are not usually smaller velociraptors down there, but things like Utah raptor and dromaeosaurids tend to be bigger. But I
Oh,
don't think they
absolutely.
were.
By modern standards, right? These are animals the size of coyotes and wolves, and in the case of Utah raptor bears, animals that we would definitely classify today as large predators, as members of the megafauna.
But can you kind of tell the age of the notosaur by any chance, stretch of the imagination, or is it just
So that's a great question. One sort of general way we could address that is just if we get a size estimation for the animal. And again, because we know specifically where some of our big pieces of armor are placed, we can compare the size of this animal to large adult specimens like the Edmontonia that's at the American Museum of Natural History. And our animal is comparable in size. So it does appear to be an adult. It certainly isn't a juvenile. If we wanted to be really specific and try to sort of say, how many years old was this animal? How many candles were there on its last birthday cake? Then we probably have to invest in a bone histology. We'd have to find a good bone that we can slice into and look at growth rings. And the answer is, for our specimen, we don't yet have a lot of elements uncovered that are good candidates for bone histology. That is, we don't have a good limb bone or something like that we want to cut into, because slicing through the osteoderms, those are not bones that are traditionally used in histological studies. Also, notosaurs, pretty rare animals. We don't have a lot of juveniles to fill in the gaps. A dinosaur bone is not like a tree trunk. You don't have all the rings preserved from the moment that it hatched out of the egg, because the bone remodels. You only have the last few years of the animal's life. And so to fill in how many years came before that, you look for smaller members of the same species, immature individuals, and see, okay, well, how many years did it take them to get that size? And you sort of play a game of Russian nesting dolls, filling in the missing bone.
because I mean, clearly, since you said this was probably a larger individual, it
Mm-hmm.
was probably not on the end of its life, but it was, well, it definitely was. I mean, it was dead. So, um,
Sure enough, but yes, we think that this is probably a big adult notosaur, not a juvenile or something like that. So if it was healthy at the time, it'd be pretty dangerous prey to go after.
so definitely a dromaeosaur probably wasn't hunting it, and I
No,
would go with something like a Tyrannosaurus.
I think a Tyrannosaur is probably the only candidate to go after a healthy adult notosaur.
And since you're talking about the serration, I just wanted to kind of, I mean, crocodilians, alligators don't really have those serrated. That's actually
No,
pretty cool.
A Nile crocodile has got very, very fine serrations, very faint, nothing like what you would see on if you were holding up the skull of a Komodo dragon
You
or
might not
something
be able
like
to
that.
see this on camera, but there's a very slight serration on this one. And this is like an American alligator. So I mean, it's a slight serration versus the
And a
obvious
slight keel, yeah.
greater serration of like a Tyrannosaurus
Mhm.
or. But I mean, did you find the tooth lodged in there, or was it just a hole? Do you think?
No, we did. We have found a shed tyrannosaur tooth at the site. Not certain if that really represents a tooth that was lost while the animal was feeding on it. Our specimen is buried in what looks to be sort of a sandbar deposit in a river system. So it's entirely possible that other material got washed in there along with this specimen. So it's hard to say for certain if the tooth that we've got is a bullet from the crime scene.
So I mean, also there were just tyrannosaurs probably in the area. You don't know. Maybe
Oh,
one just was
Absolutely,
around.
absolutely. So in our site, in the broader Glen Rock exposure where we dig, tyrannosaur teeth are not super uncommon specimens to find. We usually find pieces, parts of them every summer.
So I mean, that's kind of one of the main draws to Hell Creek is Tyrannosaurus, Edmontosaurus, Triceratops. They're
Mhm.
pretty common in that formation. It was Cretaceous, late Cretaceous, and of course they were there. So, but I mean, did could you tell if the animal kind of survived the bite, or was it just like
Oh no, it definitely seems to have been either a bite that was given by the tyrannosaur that killed it and was feeding on it, or by a tyrannosaur that was scavenging on it. This is serious damage that's done to it, and there's no evidence of remodeling or healing around the wound.
no dinosaur pathology that was kind of shown off, healing? A lot of, and usually whenever you see that, you can kind of see like how the bones kind of come back together, maybe, or
Yeah,
something
you
was
start to see
back
a
in there.
level of rugosity around the injury, especially for such a big one like that. When I worked on the Tyrannosaurus specimen at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, the animal that's nicknamed Scotty, lots of pathologies on that critter. And where it has suffered injury and survived, the bone gets really gnarly and nasty around those sites.
So, I mean, my personal favorite dinosaur, and one that is really good to look at for dinosaur pathology, is Allosaurus. Is
Mhm.
they tend to have a lot of that pathology from fights and hitting each other and tripping on things.
Well, the big owl specimen, of course, is famous for that, for all the pathologies across its body. Big carnivorous dinosaurs, almost every time you get a nearly complete skeleton, they're just littered with injuries. It was a horrible life being a large carnivorous dinosaurs, trying to make a living by eating critters like Triceratops or Nodosaurs, or in the case of Allosaurs, potentially even great big
Sauropods.
sauropods.
That's
Terrible way to do it. Did not live long. If you want to pretend to be a dinosaur, I tell this to kids, don't be the big carnivore. Don't be the apex predator. You will live a short, violent life. Be a big sauropod. Be a great dinosaur to pretend to be. Go on an easy migration, sightseeing tour of the Jurassic in relative safety.
and I mean, tyrannosaurs weren't they like cannibalistic? Wouldn't they eat each other's young if it came to that? Or
For some Tyrannosaur specimens, we've got some evidence of um, of cannibalism of tyrannosaurs biting on other tyrannosaurs. There have been some proposed instances of non-lethal biting, which may be a result of some tyrannosaurs being social, and these were injuries that were suffered during the course of sort of establishing a pecking order within the Grex, within the group.
that would be, of course, like whenever two dinosaurs fight, one doesn't always have to die. I mean, it could be a
Sure.
retreat, it could be claiming territory, a mate, food, and it's just scaring the other one away. There's all 150,000 different things it could be, and that's always just a part of it. That's fun. I mean, it's what makes it really fun is because it's a science where the answer half the time is let's go find some more.
Certainly.
I mean, and of course, in South Carolina, we don't really get a lot of those big carnivores, and well, we do have big carnivores, just not dinosaurs. We don't have dinosaurs really. I mean, we have
We
prehistoric reptiles and things of
Yeah, we
that.
don't have a lot of dinosaur specimens in South Carolina. That's absolutely true. And of course, that's because during the Mesozoic, during the age of dinosaurs, the Earth is experiencing prehistoric global warming. Volcanic activity has released a lot of greenhouse gases. There are no polar ice caps, and the water that's held today in those ice caps has flooded the world's oceans. So sea levels are quite high. We do have a few dinosaur specimens that have been found in South Carolina, but many of those are instances of bloat and float, where a dead herbivore has died somewhere along the coastline, and its carcass has filled up with decaying gases, and it's floated out to sea and been buried in the marine deposits.
Or could it possibly be some dinosaur swimming out and a marine reptile dragging it away? I mean,
Certainly could be the case. Bloat and float's a pretty common phenomenon along the coastlines today. It's a phenomenon that explains actually in Canada, famous Borealopelta, the nodosaur specimen that's been found there, and ankylosaurs, both ankylosaurids and nodosaurids were great candidates for bloat and float because they've got really, really wide rib cages, indicating that they had huge digestive organs. That's how they process their food. They've got little tiny, weak little teeth. They're not doing a lot of chewing, unlike ceratopsians and hadrosaurs. If you're a nodosaur or an ankylosaur, you just shove food into your mouth, don't chew it very much, and then let the chemicals and the symbiotic bacteria that's in your guts do all the digesting. So you've got a great big body. That means that it's very easy for you to float. And when you bloat and you float, you wind up being flipped over. And now you've got yourself a floating nodosaur carcass that's got an armored hull to it. So you can get a far ways out to sea before a shark or a mosasaur or something manages to rupture your noxious raft and you eventually float down.
and especially ankylosaurids, nodosaurids, because they got that armor. So I guess flipping would turn. I don't want to say fairly. I guess it would be fairly soon in the decaying process.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
They're back heavy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Turtles are the same way. The whole joke: you flip them over, they can't flip back. I mean, they're basically giant turtles.
They are a big one key distinction to make. The keels on nodosaur armor mean that this is not an animal, if you're a tyrannosaur, that you're comfortable stepping on. You don't sort of toy around and sit on an angry nodosaur. The keels, and because the armor is covered in keratin, same stuff that your fingernails are made out of, it turns each piece of armor into a bladed edge. This would be a very, very sharp dinosaur to mess with. A tyrannosaur has got the jaw strength to bite through
Definitely.
armor, but if the armor is sharp, the tyrannosaur will cut up its own mouth if it tries to do so.
And this is the small turtle shell I keep.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you can obviously see, of course, the top is hardened. This one is obviously from a younger specimen, so I could probably just crush it since it's not developed, but it's still great to kind of, because they say fairly similar. So, I mean, it's not sharp or anything, but I guess once you get into the larger species of turtles, like snapping turtles and things like that, they start to get little jagged plates and things on their back.
They do, of course, a great big, like alligator snapping turtle. It's sort of too big for its own shell. It can't pull itself all the way in, so it needs that extra sharp protection around it too. Yeah.
And there's probably going to be a long shot, but I mean, even alligators, they kind of got that rough patch on their back for defense, and it's
the osteoderms of a croc have got a strong keel to them as well. They don't end in a sharp point. None of them develop into the big spikes. But yeah, absolutely.
And I think since I have my osteoderm over here, it's of course the cast. And this one is not from a nodosaur; it's from an ankylosaur. But you can definitely see how much more it points up than other species.
And on that specimen, if you'll hold up towards the camera again, you can probably make out the rough surface texture that's on it. There are lots of pits, lots of grooves. Those are where blood vessels flow through it in life. And they're there because the sheath of keratin that grows over top it makes it sharp, needs the blood to give it a supply of nutrients and oxygen in order for it to
And
grow.
I mean, Stegosaurus are all up there. They got those big plates, and they have all the blood vessels and things like that on them too. That we, for a long time, didn't know why they were like that. Of course,
Yes, Stegosaurus is same thing. The plates of Stegosaurus also covered in keratin, and at least the plates that are right along the neck, they would be sharp. And of course, they are homologous to the thagomizers or the spikes. As you work your way down, you can see the transition in other Stegosaurus outside of Stegosaurus animals like Kintrosaurus. Yeah,
where they get more of the, instead of the plated kind of things, it's more basically just spikes shooting off.
And you can see transitional forms down the back.
And honestly, I prefer Kintrosaurus to Stegosaurus. Not saying I don't like Stegosaurus, because all dinosaurs have a place in my heart. But I like the look of Kintrosaurus a lot.
With the shoulder spikes, yeah.
Definitely the shoulder spikes are. It always does it, and I need to get a Kintrosaurus, and I keep reminding myself, and I keep forgetting. But I mean, so I get half awake here. So I guess, what got you into dinosaurs? What did it for you?
Oh, so I'm told that I've wanted to be a paleontologist since I was 2.5 years old. Of course, I don't remember that far back, but the story goes that my father was on a business trip to Las Vegas, a legitimate business trip, mind you, and not being a gambler. He went to a desert museum in the city, and as in all good museums, after he'd seen the exhibits, he was forced to exit through the gift shop. And in the gift shop, he found a little paperback storybook entitled The Big Little Dinosaur, because it was about a baby long neck or sauropod. And he brought that book back to me, and I had him read it to me and read it to me again and again and again. And from there, I was hooked.
That seems like a solid nail in the coffin. I mean, also just the pure fascination of dinosaurs. It's just always there. And it's like this childhood thing that always clicks back, and you're just like, I can just be a child again and just see these magnificent creatures and just think about them. I mean, especially sauropods, because it's always like, you see them and from far away or in pictures, you're like, oh, that's neat. But like, you see one in person, and your head's just this the whole time. They're massive, and it's phenomenal.
I think dinosaurs have a real capacity to tap into not just sort of a childlike sense of wonder, but childlike sense of imagination, in that dinosaurs challenge our imagination. They challenge our imagination to understand, to conceptualize what it is that we're seeing in front of us, because they're so awe-inspiring, and at the same time they're mysterious and they're puzzling. But as real animals, there's the capacity, the potential to solve that problem and to understand the bizarreness and the awe-inspiring thing that's in front of you.
And I mean, it's just one of those things that it's always going to keep changing. We'll never know 100% the truth. And that, there's a small part of me that's like, dang, that really sucks. Because it would be amazing to be able to just have the full story and know exactly what was going on. But another part of me is like, that would ruin the science. It's a science of imagination. It's that starting science that kind of gets you hooked into science, because it makes you think, it makes you wonder, it makes you seek more of it. I mean, it's every child has had a dinosaur stage. I mean, it's just always part of it, whether it sticks with you or not, or it changes into God knows what, quantum physics or marine biology. Who knows? I mean, but I feel like every person I've ever talked to has, at one point or not, been like, yeah, you know what? Dinosaurs have been cool. They were in my life at one point.
Dinosaurs have often been called a wonderful gateway science. And when I'm called upon to offer an explanation for why the general public should be interested in funding dinosaur research, I think that's one of the strongest arguments you can make. When most people encounter big concepts like evolution, concepts like deep time in the history of the earth, concepts like extinction. They encounter it through dinosaurs. As you say, all kids, I think, all people go through some sort of dinosaur stage. And that's pretty unique because that means you go through a stage of fascination with a scientific subject.
Because, I mean, you brought up extinction, and one of the, I mean, of course, we have the KT extinction, the asteroid, boom, everything's dead. But I mean, well, not instantaneously, but that is like the main idea of how we view extinction, is that it's some crazy occurrence. But I mean, there's other extinctions and other things. We're in one right now, and I mean, the science, and it sucks that that's happening, but the science behind it is there to look at, to study, to help later on. Maybe not all the species should go extinct. I mean, a lot of them are definitely, and I have heard this and I have used this, us humans have become the asteroid, if you will.
Yeah, there's overwhelming evidence that the extinction event that we're in right now, and we've been in this extinction event, I think, for actually a long time. The extinction of the megafauna of the ice age, that sort of wave of extinction that begins in Africa, radiates out through Europe and Asia, eventually makes its way into North America, and then rolls its way down to South America before hitting otherwise isolated islands. Those are all brought on by the expansion of human hunting. And really, that extinction event has just continued, escalated to the modern day.
And because it's always so fun to kind of just light up somebody's world with the idea, like, we used to have rhino, or rhinos like originated in North America. They were here in North America before they were over in Europe. And
We had a huge diversity of big megafauna in North America: camels and horses and mammoths and mastodons and rhinos, certainly. And, an important point, I think, to keep in mind as we're thinking about dinosaur ecosystems, as we're thinking about the Lance and the Hell Creek ecosystems, is that right now we live in a megafauna impoverished world. You can see the most species of big mammals if you go to Africa, but even there, the number of species that are present is drastically smaller than what it was a few million years ago. And human beings are largely responsible for that. So when we're thinking about dinosaur ecosystems, there's a tendency to want, I think, to oversimplify, to be scared of the notion that there were lots of different species of large bodied critters at that time. If you go back further to the Morrison Formation in Wyoming, so to the late Jurassic, you've got multiple species of big long-necked sauropod dinosaurs walking around and coexisting. The history of the Earth teaches us in part that right now is what's weird. The ecosystems of today that we like to use as a basis for understanding the ecosystems of the past, those are actually the ones that are weird. And we're at least in part responsible for that weirdness.
it's like, you read like a dinosaur study and they're like, based on modern animals. I'm like, okay, so take it with a grain of salt. Got it. Because you look at an elephant, elephants are massive, these big, majestic, beautiful creatures. And then they'll base like some sauropod study on it. And I'm like, A sauropod was also way bigger than elephants. It depends on the sauropod, but for simplification of this conversation, Brachiosaurus was 40 elephant. You always hear the crazy estimates of weight and size, and it's like that would take a toll on how it acted. If it's larger, maybe it had to carry itself differently. Maybe it couldn't go up hills as easily, so it avoided mountainous areas, things like that. I mean, it's all just these different. Comparing it to modern animals is not the answer, but it helps.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'd be largely dead in the water if we abandoned all modern analogs and comparative anatomy with modern vertebrates. Elephants are a weird group. They are certainly a group that we'd like to use as dinosaur analogs because they're the biggest terrestrial thing that we've got. But elephants are weird.
They're very unique.
They certainly are. And they've got an interesting evolutionary history. They're very, very good swimmers. They're so much larger than the predators in their environment that they don't need to be fast to run away. They just obtain protection on the virtue of their size. Size of an elephant is not guaranteed protection in the Hell Creek. And so I think that some of our bases on elephants leads us to actually underestimate the biomechanics of dinosaurs.
Definitely.
Elephants are not pushed to the limits of what you can do at that size because there's nothing there pushing them. They don't have a lot of competition from other big megafauna herbivores, and they don't have competition from really big megacarnivores.
Because, I mean, the Hell Creek, the most famous duo, Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. Triceratops is massive. I feel like the size of Triceratops is greatly undermined. People don't really realize how big Triceratops is. I mean, you stack two people, like the average 2-meter person, on top of each other. That's pretty much the height of Triceratops. And I mean, they're as big as elephants and things.
Oh, absolutely. Big Triceratops specimen is larger than a big African elephant. We've got a Triceratops skull here in the Mace Brown Museum. We've got it outside next to a Tyrannosaur skull. I want to see the Tyrannosaur. And when they come to look at the Tyrannosaur, they're like, that's smaller than what I thought it would be. And the reason they think it's smaller is because it's right there next to this enormous skull of the Triceratops. Triceratops is so big, it dwarfs the very scary Tyrannosaur skull that's next to it. It's a huge animal.
But the other half of that is that Tyrannosaurus is also right there at the same size too.
Oh, absolutely.
They tower each other. So, I mean, if we were to somehow introduce some crazy massive lion to Africa, the size of an elephant, horrible idea. I wouldn't recommend it, but elephants would probably change over time. After a while, they'd probably maybe get faster, maybe smaller. Maybe they would develop a more capable defense mechanism other than tusks and size. I mean, it is.
Yeah, the question there is whether or not Tyrannosaurs and more broadly, whether or not large-bodied theropods have been an evolutionary keystone species. When we talk about keystone species in terms of modern ecology, we're talking about a critter that exerts influence over the ecosystem that is disproportionate, far greater than what its biomass in the ecosystem would suggest. When I'm talking about an evolutionary keystone species, I'm talking about the presence of a species or a lineage of species that exerts undue evolutionary influence on the evolution of other animals that share the ecosystem. Does the presence of large-bodied theropods have a big impact on how herbivorous dinosaurs evolve? I think if you're going to make the argument that does, the relationship between Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops is a pretty good one. Triceratops is a scary vegisaur.
And Triceratops is on the larger spectrum of the ceratopsians, because
Yes,
a lot of the
it's tied up there with animals like Torosaurus, um, Triceratops, etc. It's a really big animal. It's the maximum,
because you
and
look
in
at
that
things
way,
like
perhaps exemplifies Cope's rule.
Pachyrhinosaurus, Styracosaurus, Chasmosaurus, they're a bit smaller.
Oh,
And I
absolutely,
mean, you look at it and you're like, a T
much
Rex
smaller.
probably it would have a difficult time, but it would probably have an easier time hunting a Styracosaurus versus a Triceratops,
I would certainly think so.
simply based on size. I mean, I'm pretty sure T Rex probably wasn't all the time just hunting Triceratops. If it was probably a lot more dangerous than we thought it was.
You would certainly think, if given a choice, a Tyrannosaur would much prefer to go after a duck-billed dinosaur, something like that.
Or a smaller one. I mean,
Mhm.
and even because one of the things that is very challenging about Triceratops is you always see the whole defense circle thing, or it's like 18,
Yeah.
20 Triceratops in a circle, but there's no evidence of that. Triceratops were fairly lonely creatures. If
Yeah,
they
there
tend
are
to live in smaller groups.
a few bone beds that have been found recently that record multiple Triceratops individuals preserved together. But then we're only talking about what look to potentially be fairly small family groups.
Like
Now,
5
for
or
other
7.
ceratopsians, in particular centrosaurians, animals like
Oh,
Centrosaurus, Styracosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus,
smaller,
those animals are known from huge, massive bone beds.
especially
In some
Pachyrhinosaurus.
instances, especially Pachyrhinosaurus and Centrosaurus, some cases, instances where there may have been hundreds, thousands of individuals on the scale of what we see today with wildebeest and bison, at least in terms of biomass. The Chasmosaurians, the group to which Triceratops belongs to, those seem to have been more loners. When we're looking for sort of the herding analog of Triceratops, maybe don't think about bison, don't think about Cape buffalo, don't think about cattle, don't think about elephants. Instead, think about rhinos,
Rhinos,
where
definitely.
they
That's what I
tend
was
to
going
be
to say.
loners. Although some rhinos can still travel around in family groups, sure, they don't form massive, massive herds.
And yeah, they tend to be solitary. I mean, I think and I'm going off the top of my head, I could be wrong, and they found something yesterday and we don't know about it yet, but I'm pretty sure like the largest Triceratops group was like 5 or 6.
I think that's about right. Although it's my understanding that excavation is continuing at a few Triceratops sites. But for the moment, at least, that's my understanding. Yeah, we're only talking about, again, what look to be sort of family groups of Triceratops,
So
not these absolutely massive herds, which are known for some horned dinosaurs. But
definitely,
horned dinosaurs, ceratopsians, is a huge group. Just as today, it would be a mistake to even lump sort of all deer together. You can have huge herds in the case of caribou, but you also have species that are loners, like moose.
moose are they're very lonely creatures. And I mean, they're also aquatic, so I heard an interesting theory that maybe Triceratops kind of filled that same niche, that maybe they could have been slightly aquatic, like moose.
So if you want to think about the habitat of Triceratops, our field sites in Glenrock are a great place to start. We've got a great microsite. So microsites are places where very small fossils are preserved, not places you go to if you want a big, dazzling skeleton to put up in your exhibit, but a great place to go to if you want to think about dinosaur ecology. And at our site, we can find the occasional tyrannosaur tooth, you can find raptor teeth, and you can find lots of duck-billed dinosaurs and lots of Triceratops teeth. Triceratops teeth from very large individuals and Triceratops teeth from little tiny individuals. We think we've got basically hatchling all the way up to the big adult. We're digging then in prime Triceratops habitat. And alongside those dinosaur teeth, we also find the teeth and other bones of animals like crocodilians and pond turtles and garfish. The environment we're digging in, we think, is actually very similar to the environment around the Charleston area here. It's very similar to the Florida Everglades. It
The
was
swampy area.
a semi-tropical, yeah, swampy, wet environment. There's no doubt in my mind that Triceratops was a good swimmer. Now, whether or not it really went into lakes and things like that to occasionally take some soft water plants the way that moose do, I don't know. But Triceratops was absolutely at home in a wet, swampy environment.
And I mean, maybe 50 years, 60 years, maybe tomorrow we might find it out. Who knows? I mean, it's just one of those things where the answer is keep digging. Let's find some more specimens. I mean, and of course, we were talking about how theropods were like could possibly be a key evolutionary creature for the changing of environments. I also think like Darwin brings the idea up. I mean, you isolate them on an island, Madagascar. I mean, you got the Abelisaurus, Majungasaurus. I mean, they were big. They hunted sauropods. I mean, they were sauropod hunters. So, I mean, was it because they
Yeah,
were sauropods in Madagascar?
interesting thing about Majungasaurus, by comparison to a lot of the other Abelisaurs, it has got proportionately very short shin bones. So it does not have a very long lower leg. And we know from comparisons to modern day critters, if you want to estimate how fast an animal is, you look at the shin bones. And if you're an animal that stands on your toes, you look at the metatarsals as well. So Majungasaurus seems to have been a belosaur that was really downgrading its ability to run quickly. I suspect that's because it's shifting over from an ecological role of going after faster bipedal ornithischians and focusing more on the relatively small-bodied sauropods that are present on Madagascar, animals like Rupetosaurus.
And you can
Hey, there you go.
You can even kind of make it out in the tooth where it's not really meant for just biting and grabbing, but more shearing or just like kind of ripping and pulling. I mean, obviously these creatures were not taking down full-grown sauropods, and if they were some big bad mamba jambas. I mean,
well, the sauropods that we got in Madagascar, of course, are tiny.
they were smaller. So
yeah, they go through insular dwarfism. So their Rupetosaurus is smaller. It's small enough that it can begin to enter the menu of a large Abelisaur like Majungasaurus. Yeah.
So I do feel like Majungasaurus could have been one of the very few Abelisaurs that actually took down full-grown specimens, if that. But
Since
you
they
get
were smaller,
like Allosaurus, where it's hunting Camarasaurus, Diplodocus, Apatosaurus. Those are really massive. They probably were not taking down full-grown specimens, but maybe juvenile, teenager.
well, that's the way it
Definitely
is for most predators. Of course, you're not going after the biggest, healthiest members
absolutely.
of the group. No, you're going after the injured ones, the really old and sickly, and lots of young.
Definitely. And one of the places that I really like to look at for just massive sauropods is Argentina. They tend to have a weird pattern of massive dinosaurs, massive sauropods, massive carnivores.
So there are lots of enormous titanosaurs, Argentinosaurus, of course, famous example, down in South America for sure. And they do that; those animals show up there in the late Cretaceous. At the same time that in North America, sauropods, by and large, are sort of being downgraded. Their ecological influence is diminished, and they seem to be being replaced by other kinds of herbivores like hadrosaurs and ceratopsians. Although we still have Alamosaurus, which, to be fair, is a pretty big animal.
And I mean, there could be something with a southern migration kind of idea, possibly, of sauropods kind of leaving North America. And of course, not all of an animal like species leaves. That's why we still have like it's not the same species, but similar species evidence across some continents. How we have like like, I mean, look at the Ice Age. I mean, we have like mammoths and mastodons here, but there's also still elephants in Africa. We also have them in Siberia, and you can kind of see how they've kind of scattered. So, like you're saying, Alamosaurus was here, and
There's a fascinating story to be told, and we haven't pieced it all together yet, about migrations across major land masses in the very end of the age of dinosaurs, in the late Cretaceous, both in terms of the potential for some animals to have been coming in from Asia, coming down through Alaska into North America, and with the loss of the Western Interior Seaway, the two halves of North America that had previously been divided, merging back together. And there's a
introducing new
fascinating,
species that way.
yeah, of what animals move from one side to the other. And we know from the Ice Age examples that when you connect big continents together and you have migrations back and forth, there are often very clear winners and losers. Particular groups lose out; they're outcompeted by new arrivals.
And maybe not even necessarily in the ecosystem that they're in. I mean, we used to have lions in North America, like that were in Africa. They used to be here in North America. We don't have them anymore, so clearly they didn't survive here. But they're still around in Africa, so clearly they survived better there. So I mean, maybe it brought new species to new ecosystems where they can thrive better. They can hunt more, get larger, get smaller, get however they need. And I mean, even just the extinction of like terror birds was because of like Smilodon, that kind of new species introducing and evolution coming into existence, kind of a new species coming in. I mean, can wipe out another species and another. I mean, like,
Sure, and sometimes this may certainly have contributed to the demise of the terror birds. The arrival of new species with the Great American Interchange there, yes, Smilodon comes down. Maybe Smilodon is sort of single-handedly responsible, or saber-toothed cats are single-handedly responsible for the demise of the terror birds. But it's also worth noting that with the arrival of herbivores, a lot of the animals that terror birds were accustomed to hunting,
we're not
they
there.
get lost. You lose a lot of the marsupials and some of even the Xenarthran herbivores that were present. They get replaced by a whole new cast of herbivorous prey,
And I
which
mean,
Smilodon was accustomed to going after.
and I mean, even looking at Smilodon, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, they were very specialized hunters too. I mean, they were very specialized to aim for the jugular of larger animals to kind of pierce them and, for lack of better words, make them drown in their own blood, which sounds very violent. But whenever you start to get smaller creatures like more modernish looking deer, maybe they're faster, maybe they can have better stamina, Smilodon starts to disappear. And it's
Sure, and again, I would argue that that is tied at least in part to human hunting. We are big game hunters. It
definitely.
is easy for us to prey on the large megafauna, so we're in direct competition with animals like Smilodon fatalis.
And of course, even for us, any species, if you can outnumber and you have the right tools and the right materials, and you can outnumber a bigger prey, or you got the smaller prey where it's going to be harder to catch and it's not really worth catching because they could feed like one person, you would go after the bigger prey because, I mean, you can take it down, you can feed the whole village, problem solved for a month. I mean, a mammoth's got a lot of meat on its bone and it could feed like 6 people for a long time. So, I mean, it's kind of that thing. So even so, we weren't really hunting those smaller creatures. Not to say that we weren't at all, but while we still had things like mammoths and larger, bigger creatures. I feel like we were hunting those more than the smaller creatures.
Megafauna too, even if we weren't specifically targeting the megafauna is intrinsically sort of extinction prone. And that's because as large-bodied animals, there just tend to be fewer of those present in the population in an ecosystem at one point in time because they have such greater resources. Per section of area, you can support fewer elephants than you can rabbits. And for that reason, they're very, very sensitive to changes in the ecosystem. And also, large-bodied mammals have the problem of they reproduce very, very slowly.
Even like humans, like what is it called? The gestation period for it's pretty slow. Unlike rabbits, where it's like 2 to 3 months, now they're ready, another kid. 2 to 3 months, it's like
and not just one kid, but an entire litter. As warm-blooded critters, we mammals have the advantage that we grow up very quickly. So once we're born or we hatch, we reach sexual maturity relatively quickly. But as large animals, an elephant does not want to have twins. That's a terrifying prospect. It wants one offspring at a time, and that takes a long time. Then, even in the fast growth rate, for that offspring to grow up. Right now, rhinos in Africa are in serious danger of extinction, even though they've got some of the best protection possible. There's some rhinos that are nearly under 24-hour guard. The problem is that once they've been widowed down to so few, it takes a long, long time for the population to rebound. And since we're talking about titanosaurs, a point I'd like to make is that dinosaurs, in many ways, have the best of both worlds. Even though dinosaurs are an icon of extinction, because they ultimately all, except for birds, get wiped out at the KPG boundary. Dinosaurs have this wonderful combination. Even though they're large-bodied critters, they've got fast growth rate because they're endothermic and warm-blooded, and they reproduce in droves. They lay many eggs. A big titanosaur doesn't produce one offspring like an elephant. It can produce a clutch of 30 or more eggs at a time. And so if you imagine a dinosaur situation like what we've got with rhinos right now, where if you could protect the dinosaurs for a while, their population would have the ability to rebound very quickly. Yeah. So in an extinction event, or where you're getting close, where you're pressing into one, where there's been a bottlenecking event and you only have a few individuals left, dinosaurs have the ability to rebound from that. I think that's going to be one of the great ironies of the study of dinosaur paleontology, that we start out with this group that for many years was thought of as being an icon of extinction, something that was doomed to failure. And we come to realize that part of the key to dinosaur success for 160 million years worth of dinosaur reign is that, in fact, this group of animals, unlike modern day big mammals, was really, really good. Yeah, really good at enduring extinction.
And I mean, you can even look at it with like an example, like, because you get the whole, we don't understand time and how close things are. And well, there were elephants around, or not elephants. Of course, there were elephants around. There were mammoths around during Egypt. But you look at them and they're lost on this island. And then there's like 1,000 of them. They breed really slowly. They don't really have enough offspring because it's one. So they get really into that kind of incest kind of, it's really weird to think about, but it's like just pretty much just turns into incest after a while, and then they kind of just die out because they can't really sustain life anymore.
Yeah, big modern mammals are, I think, really, really prone to extinction. And eventually in dinosaur paleontology, we're going to be able to look at evolutionary rates. And I think one thing that we're going to see is that whereas in mammals, there's often this pattern of small forms evolve to be big, and then they go extinct. And then what fills those gaps are new varieties of small-bodied critters that evolve to be big, they go extinct, and you've got that sort of pattern. I think what we'll see, what may have been a key to the success of sauropod dinosaurs, is that they get big, and then when one species go extinct, there are still lots of species of other
Definitely.
large-bodied members of that same lineage that step in, and that's how you can have these long sustained dynasties of major dinosaurian lineages. I think that's something that makes the evolutionary story of dinosaurs fundamentally different from that of the evolutionary story of big mammals, even
Because
though, as you say, we like to use them as analogs.
I mean, dinosaurs, they do have that kind of small, one species goes extinct, now there's that smaller species that kind of has to fill in the niche and evolve and come in, but it's never as drastic as mammals.
I don't believe it is. Now, to be fair, mammals have not had a lot of time to shine in the ecological roles of large-bodied carnivores and herbivores. Um, but based on sort of the last 65, maybe we'll just say 50 million years of big mammal evolution, I think that there is a difference in the pattern. But moreover, I think that's a real interesting area for future paleontological research. It's one that I'm particularly fascinated by.
Because, I mean, it is very clear that big mammals are extinction prone, but because you were talking about how like they go extinct and now they're small again and now they have to come back. Dinosaurs never really had that massive drop back into, other than like KT extinction or other extinction events where they kind of all
Sure, but
died out.
that's an unusual circumstance. The end Cretaceous mass
Yeah.
extinction event is a very unusual instance of a collision with a massive space
For
rock.
lack of better terms, it was a freak accident. I mean,
Absolutely, it was a cosmic event.
and it's just how it works. I mean, it was just well, it happened. I mean, it's not really stopping it. So, but I mean, of course, you do have the rise of the dinosaurs with smaller creatures like Coelophysis and Herrerasaurus and smaller theropod, maybe smaller proto dinosaurs kind of coming up. Of course, you have that, but you reach like peak massive and Jurassic with these massive sauropods.
Mhm.
But then it even goes above that in the Cretaceous with Titanosaurs. So it's not really a drop. It's more like a slight little bump, and then it goes back up,
Mhm.
and it's just in that like slight bump is like kind of like a, all right, we gotta correct it real quick. With
And
like
this seems to be true for some of the other lineages too. The Allosauroids of the Jurassic, although Tyrannosaurs seem to outcompete them in the north. In the south, you've still got the same basic cast of characters as far as the same major lineages doing their thing.
I mean, South America was. I don't want to say it stayed Jurassic, but it pretty much did. It stayed. It stayed very relatively still in the Jurassic period.
It's
Um,
similar. I regret the loss of stegosaurs, of course, but yeah.
of course, but I mean, North America really went into the Cretaceous with the new Tyrannosaurs and sleek new designs like the
The
Stegosaurus turned
iguanodontids. Yeah.
more into, definitely. I mean, but you can definitely tell how there was that correction that they kind of stayed on top of and fixed, and they kind of stayed around though. Because you mentioned that Stegosaurus disappeared, but I mean, you kind of get ankylosaurs that were very similar to them, but not the same, but very similar.
Well, stegosaurs are a weird kind of dinosaur. I like them
Definitely.
very, very much. One major difference between a stegosaur and an ankylosaur, besides the big um, plates and the showy spikes, that doesn't get talked about a lot, is the face and the neck of a stegosaur. Last time I looked on Wikipedia, it says that stegosaurs were low grazing animals because they've got short necks. And that's not right. And ankylosaur has got okay, a reasonably short neck, a head low to the ground. A stegosaur, if you Google a stegosaur skeleton, I think you'll actually be impressed by how long the neck
It
is.
is
It's certainly
surprisingly
no
long.
shorter than a neck of a deer, an elk, or something like that. Animals that, although they certainly are capable of grazing low, are also browsers. Stegosaurs have also got very narrow skulls. Stegosaurs, I think, are selective feeders. They're animals that are very good at high grading the Jurassic salad bar.
Even this one, the head is more up. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and look
surprisingly
how
long
narrow
instead.
that head is. Everyone gets fixated on the small size of the stegosaur's head as it relates to the brain. Get fixated on how small that means the mouth is. This is not a lawn mowing animal. This is not a critter that's shoving huge amounts of food into it. This is an animal that's going for quality food over quantity. It's being very, very choosy about what it wants to munch on, and to be selective like that. It's not just limited to grazing down low. It can feed up high and in between.
Versus like Euoplocephalus, where its head is, it's still raised up because it's a hard
All
part to
dinosaurs have
control.
got an S-shaped neck to some extent,
But of course, I mean, it's
and
definitely
it's
much
got a
better.
broader beak too. It's better at shoveling stuff in there. Yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, they
Anyway,
also
I
like
love
to do grass.
stegosaurs, and I regret their loss. Speaking of undue exits, it's the end of the day here. We've been talking about dinosaurs, not surprisingly, for over an hour. I hope I've given you enough fodder for the podcast. I understand if you need to go back and selectively feed certain clips from it, but I should actually head on out.
If you need to go, you need to go. I got it. I mean, I would love to have you on another time, maybe, of course,
For
maybe
sure,
future.
happy to do it.
Maybe focus on you more next time because we kind of got carried away talking about other stuff. But I would
Well,
love that too.
that's the fun part. It would be a
That is,
shame to do a dinosaur podcast and spend it
without
talking
dinosaurs,
about a person.
and that is part of the reason that I try to stay faceless on my podcast is because I don't want it to be about me. And that sounds weird to say about like a podcast because it's like, oh, well, it's you talking. It should be about you. And the aspect of me is my love of dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures. So aside from that, I want to put more of the focus onto these creatures, onto what's going on, onto them and these unknown creatures. Because walk up to any person on the street and go, have you heard of Majungasaurus? They're going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Is that even English? Eh.
And
I
it's
want
it's not, of course.
it's not, but I mean, neither is Tyrannosaurus, but we won't talk about that.
That's true. Tyrannosaurus T-Rex is the most famous binomial, the most famous genus and species name that's known. More kids, you can walk into a kindergarten class, say Tyrannosaurus Rex, everybody knows what you're talking about. More people know that genus and species than know Homo sapiens, than know your own binomial.
And that's really crazy to think about. But on top of that, I want to bring some of these other lesser known dinosaurs into the light, kind of just be like, have you heard of this little guy? Well, this thing is 2 feet tall, but it'll maul your face in. And that's half the fun. I mean, Archaeopteryx is really fun to look at. I love Archaeopteryx.
Oh, goodness, yes.
But you also get things like Epideptopteryx, where it's this little nightmare fuel creature. And I love talking about it because it's got this elaborate name that I probably pronounced wrong and just butchered, and somebody's yelling at me in the comments section. But
it's a dead language, everyone. Don't be too harsh on dinosaur pronunciation.
Definitely, and I feel like half of the names are.
Saurolophus, Deinonychus, Deinonychus.
I definitely feel like some people are a little bit too touchy on that, and it's like, can we forget the name for a second and just look at this beautiful creature? So, I mean, if you got to go, you got to go.
I'm afraid I do. I need to head off and let my dogs out.
You will see plenty of me in the future. Trust me
Okay,
on that. So, see you around.
absolutely. Bye.
Bye. That was Dr. Scott Persons. I do suggest checking out his website if you do want more on him. That way, if you do want more on him, he's got more of his life story on there. Let me scroll down. He's got some amazing YouTube videos that I actually watched right before this and completely forgot to bring up. Wow. He's also got his other social medias off to the side if you want to go check more of him out. Nothing else is loading on here, probably because my computer is old, but that's a different topic for a different day. But if you want more of me, again, you can go follow me on Instagram at Prehistoric Life Podcast. Let me pull that up real quick. Right over there, you can go check it out. I post additional content, things like what's going on in the week, things like that. And if you want to see my episodes early, I try to upload them earlier on YouTube just to kind of be like, go subscribe to my YouTube channel. But so I try to release twice a week, but go check that out. I try to release everything a bit earlier. And if you want all of that in one place, of course, you can go check out my website, prehistoriclifepodcast.com. I try to keep everything from there. From there, you can get to my YouTube and Instagram. And remember, if you want to see some of these amazing creatures like Nodosaurus and Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops in museums, go check out, where is it? There it is. Dinosaur Trips. Go check out Dinosaur Trips. $250 off if you tell them Prehistoric Life sent you. Amazing people, and I loved interviewing them. So please go show him some love. And he's got a lot of amazing trips coming up. So again, I'm your host, Eric Crawford, signing off. I will see you all next time. Remember, keep it prehistoric. Goodbye.